Welcome to the BioPharma Business Intelligence Unit, where symbolic integrity meets strategic clarity. At BBIU, we go beyond the headlines to decode the structural forces behind global biopharma, AI, and economic realignment. If you value precision, verification, and symbolic depth, this channel is for you. Subscribe now to access our weekly briefings, dossiers, and intelligence reports, and consider joining our institutional tier to unlock early warning systems, custom metrics, and exclusive strategic insight. You're not just listening, you're entering the future of epistemic intelligence. www.biopharmabusinessintelligenceunit.com.
FDA blocks Biogen's high-dose Spinraza in the U.S., a regulatory setback driven by manufacturing controls. Executive Summary. On September 23, 2025, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration (FDA) issued a complete response letter, CRL, declining approval of Biogen's high-dose Nusinersen Spinraza regimen for spinal muscular atrophy (SMA). Unlike typical CRLs driven by safety or efficacy deficiencies, this refusal centered exclusively on the chemistry, manufacturing, and controls (CMC) module. The FDA requested updated technical documentation before reconsideration. Biogen immediately announced its intention to resubmit, emphasizing that no clinical deficiencies were raised. The higher dose regimen, already approved in Japan and under EMA review, is based on the Phase 2/3 DEVOTE trial, which demonstrated significant motor function gains in infants and sustained benefit across SMA subtypes. This decision underscores the increasing strategic weight of manufacturing quality and regulatory rigor in biologics approvals, where CMC often becomes the critical gatekeeper, even for therapies with strong efficacy data. BBIU Opinion: Spinraza High Dose and the Anatomy of a Regulatory Setback. When the U.S. Food and Drug Administration (FDA) issued a complete response letter to Biogen on September 23, 2025, it sent a very specific signal. The decision did not undermine the clinical promise of Spinraza, the first therapy ever approved for spinal muscular atrophy, SMA. It did not challenge the results of the DEVOTE study, NCT 04089666, which showed that a higher dose of Nusinersen improved motor outcomes in infants and stabilized function in older patients. Nor did it question the safety profile of the drug, which has been established through years of global use. The rejection came from a different place entirely. Module 3 of the Common Technical Document, the Chemistry, Manufacturing, and Controls (CMC) section. This is the module that answers one simple but decisive question. Can the company manufacture this medicine consistently, at scale, and under conditions that guarantee purity, stability, and reproducibility? In Biogen's case, the FDA's answer was not yet. The regulator asked for updated documentation, validation data, and technical assurances that the higher dose formulation meets the same rigorous quality standards as the original product. This is where the story begins, not ends. Organizational fault lines. Spinraza is already a global product, with $1.57 billion in revenue in 2024. Its clinical efficacy is uncontested. Thousands of SMA patients worldwide rely on it. But in the hyper-competitive landscape of rare disease therapies, Spinraza is no longer alone. Roche's Evrysdi, Risdiplam, offers an oral alternative, and Novartis's Zolgensma offers a one-time gene therapy. Both have eaten into Biogen's market share. Faced with this pressure, Biogen's strategy was clear. Push a higher dose regimen that could reassert clinical superiority and extend the product's life cycle. The sales organization, aware of declining numbers, was almost certainly pressing for speed. The clinical team, buoyed by the strong DEVOTE data, saw no reason to delay submission. The manufacturing division likely warned that certain validation data sets, long-term stability studies, process comparability analyses, large-scale batch reproducibility, were incomplete. And the Regulatory Affairs Department was caught in the middle, forced to choose between waiting for exhaustive documentation or filing the SNDA with what was available. They chose speed. The FDA responded with a CRL. The financial shadow. The financial consequences are immediate and measurable. Analysts had projected that approval of the high-dose regimen in the U.S. could bring an additional $500 to $700 million annually, cushioning Spinraza's decline. With approval delayed by at least 9 to 18 months, the typical window for resubmission and re-review of a CMC-focused CRL, this revenue will not materialize in 2025 or early 2026. The market reacted accordingly. Biogen's stock dipped on the announcement, not because Spinraza's science was doubted, but because the company revealed an organizational weakness. For investors, a CRL rooted in CMC is less about the drug itself and more about Biogen's ability to execute, coordinate internally, and anticipate regulatory expectations. The patient and physician lens for SMA patients and their families, the decision is bittersweet. The standard dose Spinraza remains available, but the anticipated improvements of the higher dose, greater motor gains, better long-term outcomes, are now postponed. Families are left watching global discrepancies unfold. Japan has already approved the high dose, Europe is still reviewing, and yet the US, home to the largest SMA market, says no. This creates a symbolic fracture. Physicians may well ask, if Japan considers the high dose safe and effective, why does the FDA withhold it? Patients may interpret the CRL as bureaucratic obstruction. Competitors, meanwhile, seize the opportunity. Roche can emphasize the convenience of Evrysdi, Novartis can highlight the one-time nature of Zolgensma, and both can contrast their regulatory green lights with Biogen's red stop. Precedence and probabilities history shows that CMC-related CRLs are not death sentences. Vertex Orkambi expansion received a CRL in 2015 and was approved within a year. Sarepta's gene therapy faced a CRL for CMC issues and eventually secured approval after about 12 months. Bluebird's Beticel took longer, 18 months, but was ultimately approved. The common thread is clear. When the problem is documentation, not safety or efficacy, the probability of eventual approval is very high, 80 to 90%. The issue is time. Each month lost to regulatory corrections strengthens competitors and erodes Biogen's symbolic leadership in SMA. Symbolic and strategic consequences. Spinraza once embodied scientific triumph, the first therapy to transform SMA from a fatal diagnosis into a treatable disease. Today, it embodies something else, the limits of organizational coherence in biopharma. The strategic error was not clinical, it was structural. Biogen underestimated the sovereignty of Module 3. In today's regulatory environment, CMC is not an appendix, but the very gatekeeper of approval. A company can deliver flawless clinical data, but if its manufacturing dossier is incomplete, the regulator will not bend. Inside Biogen, blame may fall on regulatory affairs, but the deeper truth is cross-departmental misalignment. Sales pushing for speed, clinicians pushing for recognition, manufacturing aware of gaps, RA caught between. The FDA did what regulators do best: enforce the principle that quality is not negotiable. BBIU conclusion: Biogen's high-dose Spinraza is a case study in how corporate urgency collides with regulatory sovereignty. The drug works, patients could benefit. But organizational impatience and strategic short-termism led to a dossier that was not defensible. The consequences ripple outward. Financially, lost revenue and shaken investor confidence. Clinically, delayed access and shifting loyalties to competitors. Regulatorily, a reminder that Module 3 defines the fate of every medicine, a point we have explained in detail in our educational analysis. BBIU from lab bench to FDA approval. Why Module 3 defines the fate of every new medicine. Symbolically, a shift from pioneer to laggard, at least until Biogen resubmits and secures approval. The final irony is that Biogen will almost certainly succeed on resubmission. But by then, the real battle for market share, physician trust, and patient allegiance may already be lost. Annex: hypothetical scenarios behind the FDA's CRL to Biogen's high-dose Spinraza. When the FDA issues a complete response letter, CRL, it does not always make public the precise reasons for its decision. Companies like Biogen, for strategic and legal reasons, rarely disclose every technical deficiency identified by the regulator. Instead, they provide a carefully crafted statement, in this case, noting that the FDA requested updated technical documentation in the Chemistry, Manufacturing, and Controls (CMC) module. This leaves analysts, physicians, investors, and patients in a state of interpretive uncertainty. What exactly failed inside Module 3? Based on precedent, regulatory norms, and the specific context of Spinraza high dose, several hypothetical scenarios can be outlined. Each comes with its own technical logic, regulatory consequences, and symbolic weight. Scenario 1. Incomplete stability, aging. Data. The science of stability. Every drug must prove that it remains safe and effective for its entire shelf life. This is not a guess, but an empirical process known as stability or aging studies, conducted under defined conditions, e.g., room temperature, refrigeration, accelerated aging. For biologics and oligonucleotides like Nusinersen, these studies are particularly demanding because the molecules are prone to degradation over time. The likely gap? At the time of filing in January 2025, Biogen may have had only 6 to 9 months of stability data for the high-dose formulation, rather than the full 12 to 24 months expected. The company may have hoped to file with interim results and deliver final datasets during the review. The FDA's view? This is unacceptable. Without complete stability data, the regulator cannot ensure that every vial administered to patients will be chemically identical and therapeutically reliable throughout its shelf life. Consequences: delay of 9 to 12 months until complete data mature. High probability of eventual approval once the data are provided. Symbolically less damaging, as the problem can be framed as a timing issue rather than a scientific failure. However, in the interim, Roche and Novartis gain an additional year to consolidate their dominance in the SMA space. Scenario 2. Undocumented manufacturing process modification. The manufacturing challenge. Producing a high-dose formulation often requires changes in excipients, purification methods, or scale-up parameters. For a sensitive biologic, even small shifts can affect product quality. The possible failure. If Biogen altered the manufacturing process, perhaps adjusting buffer concentrations, changing filtration parameters, or modifying purification steps, but failed to provide a comparability package, proving that the high dose is equivalent to the standard dose product, the FDA would see a major red flag. The worst-case implication: if the new process overlaps with or replaces aspects of the existing manufacturing system, the FDA could not only block the high dose, but also re-examine the low-dose formulation already approved and on the market. That would escalate the problem from a supplemental delay into a systemic risk for Biogen's flagship SMA franchise. Consequences: extensive comparability and validation studies required, delaying approval by 12 to 18 months or longer. Potential FDA inspections of plants and suppliers. Severe reputational impact. The narrative shifts from paperwork delay to industrial discipline failure. In the worst case, pressure could extend to the standard Spinraza dose, destabilizing existing revenue streams. Scenario 3. Insufficient validation of analytical methods. Why this matters. Analytical methods, the laboratory tools used to measure purity, concentration, and degradation, must be validated for the specific dose and formulation. A method adequate for 12 milligrams may not be sensitive enough for 28 milligrams or 50 milligrams. The plausible oversight: Biogen may have reused existing validated methods from the low-dose submission without fully recalibrating them for the high dose. This shortcut could make it impossible to prove that impurities or degradation are being detected with sufficient precision. Consequences: requirement for full revalidation of analytical methods. Moderate delay, 6 to 12 months. Perceived by the market as a shortcut mistake rather than a catastrophic flaw, but damaging to Biogen's reputation for regulatory discipline. Scenario 4. Lot-to-lot inconsistencies. The industrial truth: it is not enough to produce one batch of a drug that meets specifications. The FDA requires proof that multiple commercial-scale batches consistently meet the same standards. What may have happened? If early high-dose batches showed variability in concentration or purity, Biogen may have filed the sNDA prematurely before achieving full lot-to-lot consistency. Consequences: FDA requires repeat manufacturing runs and extensive documentation, delay of 12 to 18 months. Investor backlash: such inconsistencies signal deeper issues in manufacturing reliability. Symbolically damaging, as it suggests that Biogen's industrial execution lags behind its scientific promise. Scenario 5. GMP deficiencies. During plant inspections. The role of inspections. As part of reviewing a new application, the FDA often inspects the facilities where the drug is produced. These inspections evaluate compliance with good manufacturing practices, GMP. The possibility: if inspectors found critical deficiencies, inadequate documentation, improper controls, or non-compliance with standards, the FDA would have no choice but to issue a CRL. Consequences: delays of 12 to 24 months depending on remediation efforts. Severe reputational damage. Risk that deficiencies extend to other Biogen products, amplifying financial impact. Investor confidence shaken not only in Spinraza, but in Biogen's broader manufacturing ecosystem. Scenario 6. Packaging, device, or administration issues. The overlooked detail. A higher dose intrathecal injection may require new vial formats, altered excipient concentrations, or revalidation of the lumbar puncture delivery system. The risk. If Biogen failed to fully validate compatibility between the new formulation and its packaging device, the FDA could block approval until these issues are resolved. Consequences. Moderate delay, 6 to 12 months. Low to moderate reputational risk. Framed as a technical fine-tuning issue, but still another lost year of market opportunity. BBIU commentary. From all these scenarios, the most probable is incomplete stability, aging data. This aligns with Biogen's statement that the requested information is readily available, suggesting it already exists but was not complete at the time of submission. This scenario points to a tactical miscalculation, filing early to beat competitors, hoping to fill gaps during review, and failing to meet FDA's uncompromising standards. The most dangerous scenario, however, would be an undocumented change in the manufacturing process. That would transform the issue from a delay in extending Spinraza's life cycle into a systemic threat, raising doubts about the integrity of the product already on the market. In both cases, the lesson is the same. In modern drug regulation, Module 3 is not a technical appendix, but the true gatekeeper of approval. A company can demonstrate efficacy and safety in world-class trials, but without bulletproof evidence of manufacturing reliability, the FDA will not yield. For Biogen, this CRL is not just a pause in its commercial strategy. It is a stark reminder that organizational shortcuts in quality and documentation can reverberate across finances, patient trust, and global competitiveness.